Hey guys, I'll start out with a disclaimer. I had back surgery. It's been like a month now. It's finally, perfectly healed. It's a successful surgery. However, I'm still on Lyrica. Actually, today's my first day of starting to wean it. The Lyrica has caused a significant cognitive deficit within my already deficient brain. So if I'm kind of losing my train of thought, it's because of the Lyrica. All right, so from keto to carnivore. In this talk, I just want to talk openly about it. I often pop up full of images because I feel like I need to justify all of the claims that I say in these videos. But for this one, I just want to speak openly. I want to explain why the ketogenic diet, first of all, is a legitimate diet that is science-based, that is not really an extreme diet. It's backed, historically by previous cultures that ate quite ketogenically and had good health. And then I want to move to the next step in the ketogenic movement, the carnivore diet. So it's a highly or completely animal-based way of a style of eating. I want to go through quickly and also justify why that's actually not as extreme as you think. Let's just put it into perspective that a vegan diet or a new plant-based going green and all that is being pushed on the public currently, if we step back a bit, we realize that there's no culture that has ever been a vegan culture. There's been highly vegetarian cultures, but none of them completely vegan without any animal sources of nutrition. And many cultures have been quite successful. Let's say if they're living on the shoreline, they're pretty much maybe only eating one or two sources of animal food from the ocean or whatnot, and they thrived on that. Historically, the plant and vegetables and stuff like that were implemented during times of famine and scarcity of the real animal foods that they required. Therefore, they did try and receive calories through these substances. We have to realize that the fruits and vegetables are not what they were originally. They're much higher in sugar compared to what God had created, or how it was in nature originally before we genetically modified these fruits to have less fiber and more sugar, basically, which I believe leads to a problem. So the ketogenic diet is not something that is new. There's the Banting diet, I believe that was in like the mid 1800s. I might be wrong, but if you Google the Banting diet, that was also a gentleman who was very fat and came to the conclusion, or he received great results by avoiding pretty much carbohydrates, and he lost all weight and he kept it off. The ketogenic diet is something that has been used and still is used with patients with epilepsy. The epilepsy, when you're in ketosis, your brain is being fueled by a different molecule, which is ketones and fatty acids. And this new molecule seems to have a great benefit for not only epilepsy. A lot of the current research is also indicating that most neurological issues are greatly improved, from mood disorders, depression, even schizophrenia. There's studies coming out, seizures, and some benefits in neurodegenerative disease like ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and multiple sclerosis. So the ketogenic diet that has been making a huge splash, and of course is greatly debated, and mainstream is not very receptive to it. It basically it shuns most of the food that is packaged, right? So all of the packaged foods that are primarily vegetable oils within them, some form of wheat or grain or soy or corn and stuff like that. These are things that are subsidized. These are things that have been greatly implemented since the low-fat era that was reinforced in the 70s, but had already started in the 1950s by removing the previous fats that mostly came from animal products. By removing these fats, first of all, that was a real deficit in the nutrition that humans were receiving. A lot of the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin K, D, E, these things are absorbed into our body and used only with fat, especially saturated fat. So there was a deficit, and already that probably had a negative effect because fat is used so much within the body. I've repeated over in previous videos about the brain being 60% fat, 50% of that 60% is saturated, cholesterol is 25% of the makeup. There's an insane amount of DHA, one of the essential omega-3 fatty acids that you receive in all animal foods. Any kind of meat, from lamb to pork to meat, all have a ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. The fish, the sardines, the caviar, the good quality eggs have a very high ratio of omega-3. So when we're implementing animals on land and animals on the sea, you get a wonderful ratio of these essential omega-3s. However, we're being pushed these plant oils, these seed oils, the canola, the sunflower, the soybean, a vegetable oil that's a blend, corn oil. All of these oils are refined and industrialized, creating a high oxidative environment. They're very brittle oils that can oxidize, which forms a rancid molecule that is quite damaging to our cells. Causes cellular damage, DNA damage, inflammation, mutations. Also, these plant oils happen to be pretty much only omega-6. So humans were getting it, like I said, through animal sources, the essential fatty acids, and all of a sudden now we're getting this concentrated form through these seed oils that only started being consumed in the 1900s with the big Crisco marketing, where all of a sudden everything was changed. Butter became a hydrogenated form of seed oil, margarine, and it was encouraged that that was healthy based on very poor science, pretty much epidemiological or observational studies that can really only form associations and never causes. So butter was demonized. Then after you had lard that we traditionally used, and that became Crisco and shortening. So the seed oils kind of replaced everything, and this totally put out of whack our omega-6 to omega-3, putting us in an inflammatory state because of this disruption in the ratios. Too much omega-6 causes chronic inflammation. From heart disease to arthritis to every single disease has a component of inflammation. Inflammation itself is not bad. It's one of the first parts of healing, but chronic inflammation creates, it is an aspect of all diseases. And the way we are eating with this omega-6 seed oils and everything, at this point in our life, it's 10% of all the calories that we're consuming, and we're being shunned. The eggs, don't eat the eggs. Oh, don't go after the fish because the seas are polluted. Oh, they put doubt about meat, about the fat part of the meat, about now the red meat, the protein, the whole thing. Well, red meat causes colorectal cancer. No, it doesn't, okay? Because these studies, again, are very poor studies that the public gets in, big bold letters in the media that put doubt about meat. There is bad science. It's not proving any causes. So we shouldn't be moving away from traditional foods that we have always eaten that never caused cancer, never caused heart disease in the previous centuries and millennia. And all of a sudden now it's ruining us. We should be smart and we should look at the current changes, the drastic changes that have occurred only in the last century. And that is the removal of animal fats. That is the increase in carbohydrates that are refined. That is the modification of our plant products, making them very high in sugar. And of most of all is the seed oils that we have never consumed. We've never gotten those sorts of fats. It's like a concentrated form. It's like a yard of soybean that to get that amount of omega-6, because it's extracted from that whole field. It's like eating a whole field of soybean. It's like nature doesn't allow us to do that. But modern refinement methods and technologies allow us to be ingesting these foreign fats. We are what we eat in a way. And these fats, since we're not eating the saturated animal fats and the monounsaturated fats from animals, and the omega-3s that are within it, the omega-6, we're not getting the proper ratios or the proper kinds. We're afraid of saturated fat, even though our brain is 60%, 50% of that 60% is saturated. Our whole nervous system has a myelin sheath that is layered. It's pretty much the insulation, like a electrical wire. That rubber around it is saturated fat. Saturated fat are in all the hormones, along with cholesterol. So we see that we're avoiding what our actual body is made of, and the avoidance of that, since they're essential, requires that the body use whatever fat that it has available, and most of that is omega-6. Therefore, we're getting sick. This is why older people now are all demented and receiving Alzheimer's. There's a component of that that is omega-6, but there's also a component that is type 3 diabetes. So there's insulin resistance within the brain that's also occurring. So not only are our elderly becoming demented, you have to recognize that elders in previous cultures, right until the day they died, were the wisdom within the tribes, within the cultures. The older people, with all of their experience, were the people that were teaching the new generation. Now, the destruction of that paradigm, that dynamic, that structure socially within the tribes, communities, and families has been to our detriment. Me as a parent, when I started taking care of children in my early 20s, I took care of my 4 stepchildren, had 2 more. I was not wise. I was learning. Basically, I made full of mistakes. And now that my children are almost teenagers and are going to leave in the next 5 or 6 years or so, now I'm a wise parent. And it's like, great, I learned all these mistakes. And that's why elderlies used to be the wisdom storehouses. But now our elderly don't even know they're human. They get Alzheimer's and they are completely, they're lost. And we think that that's normal. I work in healthcare, and it's like, it's like every single elderly is dementia, and then they're on like psych meds and stuff like that. And it's a tragedy, and it's all basically lifestyle and nutrition that's causing that. We are getting epidemics in everything, and not only are we deficient in the proper fats that we used to acquire from animal foods, we're also building the next generation with significant nutrient deficiencies from the avoidance of nutrient-dense animal foods. Therefore, we are producing our children with nutrient deficiencies. They're coming out with increased ADHD, autism, and I think that that's a large component. Where most ancient tribes or previous tribes put a great emphasis on specific foods that the female would have, especially organ meats and whatnot, which our culture basically does not like. So the ketogenic diet is backed by previous cultures like the Maasai, like the Maori. In Weston Price's book, Weston Price, look up Weston Price Foundation. There is a book that I have called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. This is actual real science, guys. It's not stupid food questionnaires where they're making associated studies. He had the privilege in the early 1900s to go and see isolated areas around the world that were not eating, that were eating their traditional diets, which were all a certain amount of animals, some very heavily animal-based, some only animal-based. And he measured the health factors, teeth, bone densities, their susceptibility to modern diseases, and he saw that there was an amazing, strong physique, improved bone density, larger bridges, wonderful teeth, and teeth formation is a sign of nutrient deficiencies if your teeth are malformed. So that was real science. We have the science, and we see that we could use that to guide us, and that's not being used because there is an economic agenda behind what the food that we eat. I've gone through many videos. You can go and browse through past videos and see how the current way of eating and the push for plant-based nutrition and fake mock meats that are being pushed as healthier options than animal food. You can see that these things lower our testosterone. We have a high omega-6 under our skin, which causes us to burn, and they tell us that it's about the sun, when in reality that is because we have a screwed up omega-6 to 3 ratio, causing inflammation and easily sunburn because it oxidizes very easily. And that means that we can't benefit from the vitamin D that we could get from the sun. There's no vitamin D in plant nutrition. So therefore, if you're encouraged not to eat animal food and to go vegan, you're not getting vitamin D from any of your plant sources. And all of the fats that you're getting are not animal fats, so they're all omega-3. And that causes you to burn, and then you have to put sunscreen. A lot of the plants have hormone disruptors. Just like humans have hormones, plants have hormones. And they have estrogenic hormones that mimic estrogen. So men are getting way too much estrogen through their plant foods. Soya being extremely high in estrogen. You can see the actual studies that I pop up in the video. Then after, we have parabens that are in most of our cosmetics. So not only are we rubbing sunscreen that has parabens and perfumes, the previous glass bottles that we were consuming. Sorry, the kids, if they make noise, they're upstairs. The previous glass bottle. Guys, don't forget, I'm just doing a quick video. Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, the previous containers were pretty much glass. Now everything's plastic, and plastic contains parabens, and parabens also, again, as I told you in previous videos, contain estrogen. So we're getting way too much estrogen. We're not getting the saturated fat and the cholesterol that's required to produce testosterone and sex hormones. We're not getting the vitamin D3. Did you know that cholesterol is what is turned into vitamin D3 by the sun? So when we look at, first of all, the ketogenic diet, we have to understand that when they started saying low fat, then what was it before? It was a much higher fat diet and a much lower carb diet. So therefore, this ketogenic diet is not a fad, but a return to what is the fad, the low fat era. And then after we see the benefits, I'm not going to go through the whole benefits of how the ketogenic diet works, but if you're here, you probably are quite aware already. Now, we look at the ketogenic diet that's already considered. We look at the ketogenic diet that is already considered extreme through media, through the brainwashing that we've received. And now we talk about the carnivore diet, an only animal-based diet. That's insane. First of all, people are going to talk about the saturated fat and the cholesterol and the red meat, which, again, I told you, there's no science proving that it causes any of the heart disease, the atherosclerosis, or the colorectal cancers. Therefore, they should not be demonizing ancient foods for modern diseases. It just makes sense. Do your research, because you're harming yourself by having faith in scientism. There's a scientific method where there's observation, then there's a method, there's a hypothesis, a question that's created. We try and isolate that method, all the other variables. We come to a conclusion, and that has to be retested. The science that we call nutritional science is basically all observational. It's the first step of the scientific method, yet they still call it science. My previous videos will go through the evidence about saturated fat, cholesterol, and many other things. What I'm trying to get at here is that the ketogenic diet is not new. There's been a long 50-year to 70-year fad of the low-fat craze, where we're completely switching up the kinds of food that we've always eaten. And it only takes one generation, guys, to truly forget the previous wisdom and knowledge that the other generations had. Notice that our grandparents had cod liver, the importance of cod liver, the importance of liver, some form of organ meat. When you look at the RDA, the recommended dosage, recommended daily amounts, we see that that's not based on optimal amounts. We see that when we look at the nutritional facts on the side, it doesn't mean that because they're not showing vitamin K or vitamin D or other vitamins that they're not in there. It gives the impression when you look at a lot of the animal products, you might see iron and like calcium for milk and cheeses or something, but it's very limited. It looks like there's no micronutrients in these animal foods, and then after you have to go and get your vitamins by nature's little vitamins, fruits and vegetables, when in reality a lot of the vitamins are locked in a form that is not easily absorbed. There's a lot of anti-nutrients that prevent the absorption of a lot of the plant iron, for example. There's anti-nutrients defense mechanisms. There's nutrient inhibitors that don't allow nutrients to be absorbed. There's nutrients that they put on the label that are not even absorbable. I mean, rocks also have different kind of micronutrients, but we're not going to eat rocks because they're locked in a form that is unavailable to us. So the carnivore diet is an offshoot of the ketogenic diet because we're removing and eating only animal sources. It's a very, very low carbohydrate diet unless you're going after milk and certain dairy products that do have lactose. The benefits of it is that possibly a lot of the plant material, there's slight autoimmune reactions that are occurring to those micronutrients that over a long time we can develop these fibromyalgia perhaps and different autoimmune diseases from that chronic inflammation and that chronic substance that the body recognizes as foreign. So you get the benefit if you're going carnivore diet of having the low carb where you have full access to your fat. You become a fat burner. However, you're also getting the added benefit as an exclusion diet that possibly it'll help your digestion or some of your ailments. So the carnivorous diet, based on Weston Price, there are cultures that thrived, were very healthy. There's vitamin C in meat. There's a lot of things that are not being measured in meat, giving the impression that you have to go after the plants to get your micronutrients, and that's false. There are people in the carnivore diet over a decade that have been almost eating because they have severe autoimmune diseases and react to many foods on just red meat. That's how dense the animal food has. It just makes sense, guys, that we are made of flesh, and it's a lot more similar than plant flesh, animal flesh. And when we eat these things, especially like our ancestors ate nose to tail, we're getting everything that the body needs in a bioavailable form. Therefore, I encourage you to look at the ketogenic diet. And if you do go to a carnivorous diet, make sure that you are going after still a very high fat carnivorous diet, or else if you're not getting enough fat, sometimes people go and they're eating too much animal food that is lean, you're not going to feel well. That's what people used to call it rabbit starvation. When people used to eat lean animals and not getting that fat, they used to suffer consequences. So some people that go and switch from keto that's high fat, and then after go to carnivore, sometimes the fat ratio goes down, they don't feel as good. So I didn't go too much into depth, but yeah, it felt good to just share openly without, thinking of like setting up like all these pictures. I hope it helped. Hope it's a good refresher. I hope it's a good motivation for you guys. All right, see you around.